My wife blindsided me for her boss and kicked me out, so I got revenge doing exactly what the judge told me to do. Over a decade ago, I came home to discover that I was being moved out by my wife. We weren't in a great place, but I was blindsided. I was also served with a protection order that stated I could not come home without prior written permission. I had to go through my wife to see the kids, and it was in effect for 90 days. I was devastated. A relative connected me with a bulldog of a lawyer. This lady was brilliant and no nonsense. She filed a rebuttal to the protection order but told me that these things take time, and we were unlikely to see a judge before the 90 days were up. She was very clear that I must follow the court order to the letter and that if there was any evidence otherwise, I would be in an uphill battle if my wife renewed it. It only took one day before my now ex needed me to take the kids. I had crashed at a friend's house, so I had no place to take them. We agreed that I would watch them at home. I waited a few blocks away while waiting for an email. My ex called me, and I reminded her of the details of the order, stating that I wouldn't come until I had permission. This happened twice more within the first week when I waited down the street. So I told her I wouldn't leave where I was staying until I had the email, which was about 20 minutes away. I texted her to remind her. The very next day, she again didn't email. We had planned for me to pick up the kids to take them to school since their school was only a few minutes from my work. However, because I had not received written permission, I ran out of time to drive to pick up the kids and then make it to their school and work. She called, furious that I wasn't there. I reminded her about the permission and explained that I was out of time. As a result, she ended up being very late to work that day. She then wanted to grant me blanket permission to come and go as needed, but my lawyer advised against it. Follow the order. The culmination of this was a few weeks later when she once again forgot to send permission. Her boyfriend was staying over but didn't have his car with him. They both had to get to work, and that was the day I learned that he was her direct supervisor. My ex had to call a friend from work to pick up the kids and take them to school, and the friend found out. Of course, it got out at their workplace. Within a week of that, the boyfriend was fired over their relationship, and my ex was suspended. By this time, I had my own place, so the kids ended up staying with me most days. I later learned that the protection order was the boyfriend's idea. My ex was quite mad about it as it turned into evidence that I wasn't a threat to her or the family, and the judge was quite harsh with her over it when we settled for support and parenting time. She called it intentional and harmful parental alienation. Sucks to suck, doesn't it? Update 1. A decade ago, my then wife, now ex-wife, began a relationship with a guy and kicked me out of my house. The boyfriend was instrumental in blindsiding me and planning on how to keep me from my own kids. Ever since, I've kinda hated him. I've always been polite and respectful with the boyfriend because he'd become my kid's stepdad. But I swore that if ever I had the chance, I'd get back at him. I figured it would be something petty, but then he gift-trapped my revenge, and I've been running with it for almost 3 weeks now. My kids are mostly grown now, some in university, some in grade school. The university kids live with me while the high school ones still go back and forth with their mom. I'm also remarried now. My wife and I each have our own vehicles, but my wife owns and insures a minivan for when we all go somewhere together. The kids are free to use it too, as only one of them has a car. We only have one set of keys, so I put an air tag on it. It's a little transponder that tracks its location. I put it on there in case the keys were lost. About 3 weeks ago, one of my older kids took the van out for the night but ended up staying at his mom's on the couch. Around 7 a.m. the next day, another kid asked to use the van. I pinged the air tag only to find out it was hours away in an industrial section of another town. I was quite concerned about why my kid was out there. I called him up, and he was at his mom's where he said he'd be. He had no idea the van was missing. I called the police and gave them the location of the van. Within 20 minutes, they had stopped the van, and the driver said he had permission to use it. Lo and behold, it's my ex-wife's boyfriend. The police weren't very interested in detaining him as it would be easier for him to just drive the van back to our town, and we could sort it out here. However, it wasn't my van, nor was he listed on the insurance to drive it, so I asked that it be impounded. In Canada, we can't press charges, but I was adamant that this was theft and that I wasn't going to let it go. Since the guy was out of town with no ride, the police did end up detaining him, probably because it was easier. I was given info for the yard where the van was impounded, and since we had the next day off, my wife and I drove out to the yard to pick it up. When we got there, I first checked for any damages since it was sitting a little low. The outside didn't have any problems, but when I checked inside, I found that it was loaded with industrial fasteners and cable, think seismic mitigation. Turns out, the boyfriend used my wife's van to pick up stuff for work. My wife turns on her heels and walks to the office. I had to jog to keep up. She then asks who has access to the van. They say they have the only set of keys, so my wife is assured that only she or I can get access to the van. At this point, I get where she's going with this. I tell them, okay then, make sure you don't give the keys to anyone else if they show up. I had $35 with me, so I gave it to them as a tip. They promised me that no one would get in there, and they actually moved the van into a secured area within the yard. Then we went home without the van. We weren't even home from the long drive when I got the first text from the boyfriend about getting the equipment. I explained that we left the van as there were expenses we were not going to pay like towing, impounding fees, daily storage. I told him that he'd have to pay for them before I pick up the van. He was super mad and swore he would pay me back, but I said no way and hung up. Within an hour, I got a call from his boss. They needed the equipment ASAP for a time-sensitive job. I explained that it was impounded and that I wouldn't have time to get it until next week now. And I wouldn't go unless they paid in advance. The boss swore up and down at me. I calmly explained that I didn't steal a vehicle to transport his stuff. The boss was having none of that, so I said I won't tolerate that abuse and hung up. Then I blocked him and his company on every platform I'm reachable on. That was 3 weeks ago. Since then, I've been able to make excuses every single time the boyfriend tries to arrange picking up the van. Often because the kids don't have the van, so I have to drive them around. The boss has gotten through a few times using other numbers, and sent a ton of emails that I ignore, but I did reply and explain that both my wife and I need about 4 hours to do the round trip, and that it needs to be paid for ahead of time, and that it's added up. $25 a day for secure storage plus towing and impound fees, etc. In addition, I wanted to be paid for the fuel the boyfriend used, as well as our travel. The boyfriend and I agreed on the standard 58 cents per kilometer, and so the boss transferred us for the total cost of our driving. By now, the van has made one trip, and our car has done two. It came to almost $600. So on Friday, it finally happened. My wife and I drove out and picked up the van. It was prepaid and ready to be released. I dropped off a dozen brews at the office when I picked up the keys and went to grab the van. However, I wasn't going to transport their stuff personally, so I arranged for it to be held at the yard at the same rate as a vehicle, unloaded it, and left right before it closed for the weekend. I got a call from the boyfriend asking when he can come by with a work truck to get the stuff. I told him it's still at the impound almost 2 hours away, and that the office opens Monday at 9. There was only silence on the other end, so I hung up after about 10 seconds. Through this, I've been getting vague updates from my ex, who I've got a good relationship with now. She was livid with her boyfriend and was clear with me that any and all consequences were squarely on him. He's kept his job, but is missing the next pay increase and is not getting his year-end bonus. Ex said they're way too short-staffed to let him go, but he's in the doghouse at home and at work. Got him, lol.